Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you send us articles, videos, transcripts, you name it, and, well, we dive deep.
Yep, we pull out the most important bits, the interesting connections, basically doing the heavy lifting so you get the knowledge without drowning in information.
Exactly. And today we've got a really unique one. We're piecing together the entire story of a game, Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, based purely on YouTube transcripts, cutscenes, story explanations, the whole deal.
It's a different way to experience a narrative, for sure.
Yep.
Reading the unfolding story rather than playing it. Our mission today is basically to map out that whole journey from start to finish.
Right, from the world's setup, this cataclysm, to the very personal stories driving it all. So let's get into it. Where does this story even begin?
Okay, so the setting is Lumiere. It's the city that's been cut off for 67 years because of something called the fracture, the cataclysmic event.
Isolated for decades, that's rough. But there's more, right? This gauge thing.
Yeah, the gauge. It's this annual event, and it sounds pretty grim. There's a figure called the Paintress, and she draws a number on this monolith.
And if your age matches that number?
You vanish.
Yeah.
Just gone. The transcripts actually describe people turning into petals.
Wow. Petals. That's unsettlingly poetic. So how do they fight back?
They have these expedition teams. They're named after the gauge number, so the year they're formed, basically, their mission. Find the Paintress, stop the gauge, and we're focusing on Expedition 33.
Expedition 33. Got it. So they set off, presumably full of hope.
Well, yeah, you'd think so, but it goes wrong almost immediately. They're ambushed, attacked by this old man, white hair, but he's wearing an expedition uniform.
Wait, an old man up the gauge. Shouldn't he have vanished years ago?
Exactly. That's the first huge mystery. How is this guy still around? And he's ruthless, takes out most of Expedition 33 right then and there. It's brutal.
So, right off the bat, the core rule of their world is broken, and most of the team is gone. Who's left?
Among the few survivors are Gustav and Lund. And Gustav, understandably, is just shattered, ready to give up.
Can't blame him. That's devastating.
But Lund, she really steps up. She has this line, "When one falls, we continue." It's sort of their rallying cry.
Powerful stuff. So they decide to keep going.
They do. They find a message, a hint that maybe others survived, mentioning a rally point, the indigo tray. Plus, they test out Gustav's invention, something called the luminate converter. It still works, thankfully.
A luminate converter? Any
Yeah.
idea what that actually does?
The transcripts don't spell it out entirely, but it seems important for their journey, maybe navigation or dealing with
Yeah.
whatever's out there. It represents a bit of lingering hope, maybe.
Okay, so hope's flickering. They need to get to this indigo tree. What happens when they actually reach the continent outside Lumiere?
Things get stranger. They find an abandoned house, and then they encounter a creature, a Nevron, but it's not aggressive, just there.
Different from the immediate hostility they just faced.
Right. And then they find something really crucial, a journal. It belonged to someone from Expedition 81.
Whoa, way back. What does it say?
It talks about communicating with these Nevrons. But the big thing is this concept of chroma. It suggests that outside Lumiere, when something dies, its essence, its chroma, kind of lingers.
Lingers, unlike the gauge where people just vanish completely.
Exactly. It implies death itself works differently outside the city walls. A huge revelation. Maybe survival means more than just avoiding the gauge. Maybe it changes the nature of existence itself.
That's deep. This idea of chroma,
Yeah.
lingering life force. And did they see signs of other survivors?
They spot some flares, yeah. So they head for the indigo tree, hoping to meet up with others, but nobody's there when they arrive.
Another setback. The journey doesn't get easier, I take it.
Definitely not. They run into a massive storm. Some believe the Paintress herself sends these storms. They find shelter in an old outpost, described as having a melancholy beauty.
Melancholy beauty feels like a theme here. Beauty mixed with danger and sadness.
It does. They also pass through this peaceful area, full of flowers, but they instinctively avoid touching them. There's this underlying sense of unease. And later, Mael, she's another survivor they eventually meet, feels this weird sense of familiarity in that flowery place, like she's been there before, even though that seems impossible.
Deja vu in a supposedly unknown land. More mystery. It feels like the world outside is connected to things they don't understand yet. Maybe connected to the Paintress.
Could be. Then they see something else unexpected, a red tree. Turns out it marks a village.
A village out here.
Yeah, a village of Gestals. These are non-human sentient beings.
Yeah.
Back in Lumiere, Gestals were just myths, legends.
So finding them is another reality check. The world is much bigger, much stranger than they thought.
Absolutely. And around this time, two of the characters have this really poignant conversation. They talk about how, even out here, death is still final, just as final as the gamache, which seems to be their word for the gauge back home. And they admit they're having nightmares about the white-haired attacker.
The old man who ambushed them.
Yeah. They make this promise to each other. If they see him again, they run. No hesitation.
That feels like foreshadowing. So they meet these Gestals.
They do. The Gestals initially mistake them for Nevrons, which is interesting. But they manage to communicate. And one Gestal, Patak, agrees to be their guide. One of the humans notes that Gestals seem less complicated than humans.
An interesting observation, especially given how complicated things are getting for the humans. Does Patak help them?
Patak guides them, but they learn something worrying. Eskir, another old survivor mentioned before, has apparently been through the Gestal area and caused some trouble. Then they need help crossing the sea.
Who do they ask?
They end up needing help from Eskir himself, but he's eccentric, speaks in riddles, says he needs his rock, Flory, back from his neighbor.
His rock.
Yeah. And the neighbor, Francois, turns out to be a talking turtle.
A talking turtle. Okay, this world is definitely not playing by normal rules. Does getting the rock help?
They get involved in this little side quest, but remember that promise about running from the white-haired man?
Uh-oh. He shows up again, doesn't he?
He does, and he's just devastatingly powerful. They can't stop him. And Gustav, he fulfills that earlier theme of sacrifice. He throws himself in the way to save Mile.
No, Gustav, after everything.
Yeah, it's a huge blow. He was one of the original survivors from that first attack. His death really changes the group.
Just when things look completely hopeless, does anyone intervene?
Someone does. A stranger appears out of nowhere and saves Mile. His name is Verso.
Verso? Where did he come from?
Get this. He reveals he's from Expedition Zero, the very first one.
Expedition Zero, but that was
Wow.
decades ago. How is that possible?
That's the bombshell. Verso explains that members of Expedition Zero don't age. They're immune to the gauge. They're essentially immortal within this world.
Immortal. Whoa, okay, that changes everything. So the white-haired attacker, is he one of them too?
He is. Verso reveals the attacker is Renoir, his former commander from Expedition Zero.
His commander, why is he attacking other expeditions? Why betray Lumiere?
According to Verso, Renoir believes his immortality is a gift from the Paintress. He thinks if they kill her, he'll die too. So he's actively working against anyone trying to stop her, killing fellow expeditioners to protect himself.
Twisted logic. Immortality as a curse he desperately clings to, so Verso decides to help them.
Yes. Motivated by Gustav's sacrifice, and probably his own history with Renoir, Verso joins Mile and the others. He kind of steps into the role Gustav left vacant.
Okay, so now they have an immortal ally who knows the enemy. That's a big shift. Where do they head next?
Their path leads them to this strange manor. Inside, they meet a woman who looks uncannily like the curator, the person back in Lumiere who gave them some kind of special weapon.
The curator, what's she doing out here? Or someone who looks like her. Things are getting very tangled.
Incredibly tangled. And then Renoir shows up again. This time, he's with a young white-haired girl. They seem close.
Another white-haired person. What is going on?
And then Renoir drops another bomb. He looks at Verso and reveals Verso is his son.
His son? So Renoir is hunting down expeditions, and his own immortal son is now fighting against him. Wow. The family drama just went supernova.
Exactly. It makes the whole conflict incredibly personal. They try to fight Renoir, wanting revenge for Gustav, but then something strange happens. Verso shields Miel, but he calls her Elysia.
Elysia, not Mael. Where did that name come from?
We don't know yet, but it's clearly significant.
Yeah.
And right then, time just stops, freezes.
Time freezes. Okay, reality is definitely bending now.
And the white-haired girl with Renoir, she takes off her mask. She has scars. She doesn't speak. But she shows Mael this vision, a terrible fire, a family destroyed. And then, poof, the manor, the girl, they just vanish.
Leaving them with, way more questions than answers, I bet.
Yeah.
A vision of fire, a mysterious name, a vanishing manor.
Pretty much. Just confusion and this growing feeling that nothing is what it seems. But they still have their mission.
Yeah.
Get to the monolith.
Right, the monolith where the paintress does her thing. Do they finally make it?
They do. They have the curator's weapon. They have Verso. They reach the monolith. But guess who's waiting?
Let me guess. Renoir.
Renoir, again. And even with Verso, even with the weapon, they just can't beat him. He's too powerful. It looks like it's over.
But then. There has to be a but then.
There is. The actual curator shows up, the one from Lumiere. He confronts Renoir directly.
Okay, the curator versus Renoir. What happens?
The curator says something really cryptic to Renoir. He says Verso is all that remains of his son, implying maybe Renoir had another son. when he lost, or worse.
Heavy. What does Renoir do?
Before Renoir can really react, the curator does something. Makes Renoir disappear. Just like that. Vanishes him.
The curator just deletes Renoir. Who is this curator?
Still a mystery, but he clears the path. Now it's just them and the paintress.
The final confrontation, after everything they've been through, what is she like?
It's weird. The paintress looks at them, and she says, Mael isn't Alicia, and Verso isn't the Verso she knows. She calls him a trick.
A trick. She knew another Verso. And who's Alicia? Is that connected to Verso calling Mael Alicia?
It seems likely. The names are too close. She attacks them, but then she heals them. Completely contradicts herself.
Attacks and then heals. Why?
No clear reason given right then.
Yeah.
And just before she vanishes, taking the monolith with her, she looks at Mael and calls her Alicia. Again, with that name. Then she's gone.
So confusing. She fights them, helps them, uses these strange names, and then leaves. But the monolith is gone, right? So, did they win?
Well, they achieve the goal. Mael, Loon, and Sael, another survivor, they plant Expedition 33's flag. There's this moment of hope, like maybe Lumiere's finally safe.
But given how the story is gone, I feel a but coming.
A huge but. They return home, back to Lumiere. And as they arrive, this massive shockwaves comes from where the monolith used to be, and everyone in Lumiere vanishes. Just like the gate.
No. They caused it. By getting rid of the monolith, they triggered a citywide gauge.
It seems that way. Their victory becomes the ultimate catastrophe. The very thing they fought to stop, they inadvertently unleashed on everyone.
That is absolutely devastating. Is that the end?
Not quite. The perspective shifts completely. Suddenly you, the listener, are put in the shoes of someone named Alicia back in the past.
Alicia. The name Verso and the paintress use for Mael. Okay, what's her story?
We learn Alicia's family are painters. They have this incredible magic. They can literally paint entire living worlds onto canvases. These aren't just pictures. They're pocket realities.
Wait, so Lumiere, the city, the expeditions, all of it.
It was all inside one of these painted canvas worlds created by Alicia's family.
Mind blown. So none of it was the primary reality. Why was it created?
Tragedy. Alicia's brother, Verso, the original Verso, died saving her during a fire. This fire was set by rivals of their family, called the Writers.
The original Verso died, so the Verso with Expedition 33 is?
A creation? A copy, maybe. Made within the canvas. The real tragedy deepens because their mother, Aelin, was so destroyed by Verso's death that she retreated into a canvas world he had painted before he died. That world was Lumiere.
She escaped into her dead son's painting and the copies of her family.
She created versions of them within Lumiere to cope with her grief. Her husband, Renoir. Her son, Verso, trying to recapture what she lost. And Aelin. Aelin is the paintress.
The paintress is the grieving mother, lost in her own painted world, creating versions of her dead son. Wow. That reframes everything. Her actions, the gauge.
Exactly. The gauge, the number. It wasn't meant to be malicious. Aelin was essentially sending out warnings. Renoir, her real husband, had followed her into the canvas world. He wanted to bring her back to reality, to face her grief. But he knew the only way might be to dismantle the canvas world she clung to.
So Renoir, the villain, was actually trying to save his wife from this grief-stricken prison she'd made. And the gauge was her warning that he was trying to break it down.
That seems to be the core conflict. A husband trying to pull his wife from an illusion, and the wife desperately trying to preserve the memory of her son in that illusion. The exhibitioners were caught in the crossfire of this family's immense sorrow.
And what about Alicia, the daughter in the real world?
She and her sister, Clea, understand what's happening. They actually decide they need to help their father, Renoir, get out of the canvas because they need his help in the real world against those rivals, the Writers. But to ensure their mother doesn't just retreat back in, they decide they have to hide. Versus canvas, hide the whole world of Lumiere.
Hide an entire painted world. The scale of this is incredible. How does it all end? You mentioned possibilities.
Yeah, the transcripts suggest a few potential endings, all touching on this theme of grief and letting go, or not letting go. In one, Miles seems trapped as the canvas world fades, her face streaked with paint, like Aelin's suggesting she's maybe become lost in her own sorrow, echoing the paintress.
Becoming what she fought against, in a way.
Sort of. Another ending shows the canvas Verso urging Miles, as maybe Alicia Miles being pulled out, to become a painter herself, to create her own life before he fades away. A more hopeful note about creation.
And the real world ending for Alicia.
That one shows Alicia and her real family finding some peace together at the original Verso's grave. Alicia sees a vision of the expedition members, Mile, Loon, Gustav, suggesting she carries their memory. finding solace in their journey, even though they were part of that painted world.
So it comes back to dealing with grief, clinging to painted worlds versus facing reality and finding peace in memory.
That really seems to be the heart of it. The whole story is this cycle of grief, obsession, the power of creation, and the danger of getting lost in illusions, however comforting they might seem.
What a journey. We started with an expedition fighting a mysterious paintress and ended up inside a grieving mother's magical painting, witnessing a family torn apart by loss and reality itself bending.
Yeah, the key takeaways are huge. Lumiere's nature is a construct, the paintress's true identity is Aelin, Renoir's complex motivations, Verso's dual nature, and this overwhelming theme of grief driving everything.
It really underscores the power of imagination for good and ill, the beauty of what Aelin created, but the prison it became. The complexities of family, sacrifice, illusion versus reality, it's all packed in there.
It definitely leaves you thinking. Which brings us to our final question for you, the listener.
Right. After hearing all this idea of painters creating worlds, what does it mean to paint the death or paint the life in our own lives?
What realities do we maybe construct for ourselves, perhaps out of comfort or habit or even denial? And what's the potential cost of staying within those painted walls instead of facing what's real even when it's painful?
It's a heavy thought. How do we deal with loss? Do we build walls or do we find a way to remember and move forward? Seeing how characters like Aelin, Renoir, Mile, Elysia all struggled with it in different ways, it definitely gives you a lot to reflect on.
Absolutely. A complex story born from a very human tragedy.